Claire had always loved quiet places. Maybe that's why she said yes when her sister invited her to spend the summer by the sea. After years in the city surrounded by noise, rushing people, and long hours at the office, she was ready for something slower, something softer. The coastal town where her sister lived felt like a dream she'd once forgotten. Wooden fences painted white, old trees bending toward the wind, and the distant hum of waves that never stopped whispering. For the first time in a long while, Claire felt she could breathe again. She arrived on a warm afternoon in June, carrying just one suitcase and a heart full of things she never said out loud, like how tired she was of pretending she was fine, or how she sometimes felt invisible in her own life. Emma greeted her with open arms. "You're finally here," she said, pulling her into a hug that smelled faintly of vanilla and laundry soap. Her husband, Mark, followed behind with an easy smile and a quiet confidence that seemed to fill the room without effort. Claire had met Mark only twice before, once at their wedding, and once during Christmas years ago. He had always been polite, a man of few words, someone who carried warmth in his tone but distance in his eyes. Now, as he took her bag and said, "Welcome home, Claire," she noticed how easily he said the word home. It had been years since she had used that word without hesitation. That evening, the three of them sat on the porch as the sky turned into watercolor orange fading into lavender. The sea was close enough that they could hear it, steady and calm. Emma talked about her garden, her new job, her plans for the house. Mark mostly listened, occasionally smiling or adding a quiet comment that made her laugh. Claire watched them with a soft ache in her chest. It wasn't envy. It was something gentler, the sight of a simple life well lived. She wondered if she had ever wanted that too. Later that night, she sat by her bedroom window, looking out at the moonlight stretching across the yard. The air smelled of salt and pine. Somewhere in the distance, wind chimes sang. For the first time in years, she felt small in a comforting way, like the world didn't need her to perform. Downstairs, she heard the faint sound of laughter, Emma's laugh, light and free. Then Mark's deeper voice, calm and steady. They sounded happy. Claire smiled softly and turned off the light. The next morning, she woke to sunlight spilling across her sheets. The house was quiet, except for the distant clinking of dishes from the kitchen. When she walked in, Mark was there, wearing an apron, flipping pancakes. "Morning," he said, smiling when he saw her surprise. "Emma had to run to the market. I thought I'd make breakfast." Claire laughed gently. "You cook?" "Sometimes," he said. "I like learning new things. Keeps me busy." The way he said it felt familiar somehow. That quiet need to fill the empty spaces in a day. She sat at the table, watching him move around the kitchen, confident but thoughtful, like someone who'd practiced caring in small, unnoticed ways. He placed a plate in front of her, pancakes shaped like hearts. "Don't ask," he joked when she raised an eyebrow. "Emma taught me that one Valentine's Day." She smiled. "They're perfect." For a moment they shared a quiet laugh, one that hung in the air longer than expected. It wasn't strange, just gentle, unspoken understanding between two people who rarely said what they really felt. Emma returned soon after, carrying fresh flowers and groceries, filling the house again with her brightness. She placed a vase on the kitchen table and said, "See? I told you Mark would show off his cooking skills." "Show off," he repeated with a grin. "Just trying to impress our guest." It was a simple line, said in jest, but it lingered with Claire longer than it should have. Not because of the words, but because of the warmth behind them, the quiet sincerity that seemed to come from somewhere deeper. That evening, as they walked along the shoreline together, Claire felt the ocean breeze brush against her skin. Emma ran ahead, laughing as the waves chased her feet. Mark walked beside Claire, hands in his pockets, saying nothing. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was filled with the sound of waves, the cry of distant seagulls, and something else, something unspoken. When they reached the edge of the rocks, Mark said softly, "Emma tells me you used to paint. You ever think about starting again?" Claire looked at him, surprised. "I haven't painted in years." "You should," he said. "You look like someone who's meant to create things." She didn't know what to say. It had been so long since anyone saw that part of her. The part she'd hidden under deadlines and exhaustion. When they walked back, the sky had turned deep blue. Emma called out for them to hurry, laughing as she waved from the porch. Claire smiled and followed, her heart unexpectedly light. For the first time in a very long time, she felt seen not by what she did, but by who she was. And somewhere in that gentle evening light, something inside her quietly began to stir, something she didn't yet have a name for. The morning sun drifted lazily through the curtains, touching the edges of Claire's face as she sat by the window with her coffee. Outside, the sea shimmered in quiet rhythm, waves rising and falling like thoughts she hadn't spoken in years. She had woken early, before Emma and Mark, drawn by the sound of gulls and the smell of salt. There was peace in the air, but inside her, something stirred, a whisper from long ago. The sound of the ocean always reminded her of James. It had been nearly 10 years since she last saw him. She met him in a small art studio on the edge of town, back when her world still felt open and full of color. He was the kind of man who listened when others spoke, who noticed little things, the way she held her brush, the way she tilted her head when she tried to capture light. Their friendship began quietly. He would bring her coffee every Tuesday morning, always with too much sugar. She'd tease him for it, and he'd smile, that soft, patient smile that stayed with her long after he left the room. There had never been grand declarations or promises, just quiet moments that filled the spaces between words. Once, on a rainy afternoon, they had stayed behind after class. The windows fogged up, and the smell of paint hung in the air. She had painted a small landscape, nothing special, just the sea and a strip of sky, but he had looked at it like it meant something. "You paint the way some people feel," he'd said. She remembered laughing shyly, not knowing how to respond. But that sentence had settled in her chest and stayed there, a kind of warmth she carried for years. They never called it love because life had other plans. James got a job offer in another city, one he couldn't refuse. She stayed behind, choosing responsibility over what-ifs. They promised to write, and for a while, they did long letters filled with stories about their days, their work, their small victories. But time has a way of softening even the strongest echoes. Eventually, the letters stopped. Still, sometimes, when the world felt too quiet, she would remember the way he said her name soft, like he was afraid it might break if spoken too loudly. Now, sitting in her sister's home, watching the sun climb higher, she felt that old memory stir again. She wondered what had become of him. Was he happy? Did he still paint? Did he ever think of her? The sound of footsteps pulled her back to the present. Mark appeared at the doorway, holding 2 mugs of tea. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked gently. She smiled faintly. "Just an early riser, I guess." He sat down across from her, offering the extra mug. "The sea's louder today," he said, glancing out the window. "It reminds me of someone," she replied before thinking. He nodded, not prying, just listening. There was comfort in that, the quiet kind that didn't demand answers. "Funny how memories stick to certain sounds," Mark said. "For me, it's rain. Every time it rains, I think about my dad. He used to fix the roof during storms, said. It helped him listen to the leaks better. Claire smiled, picturing it. That sounds like something a patient man would do. He was, Mark said. I didn't appreciate it until years later. There was a pause, filled only by the faint rustle of the curtains and the cry of a seagull. Claire felt the old ache in her chest again, the kind that came from realizing how fast time slips away, and how much of ourselves we leave behind in the people we once knew. That afternoon, Claire walked down to the shoreline alone. The sky was pale blue, soft and endless. She let the waves kiss her feet and thought about all the versions of herself that had come and gone, the young woman who dreamed in colors, the one who waited for letters that never came, the one who learned to smile even when her heart was heavy sometimes. She wondered if growing older meant learning how to live with unfinished stories. Behind her, she heard Emma calling her name, waving from the porch with a bright smile. Claire waved back, hiding her thoughts beneath a practiced calm. Later, at dinner, Mark mentioned fixing an old sailboat he kept in the shed. It's been years since I took it out, he said. Maybe I'll show you tomorrow. There was that word again, show. It was harmless, casual, but something about it made her heart tighten, not in discomfort but in a quiet awareness. She was reminded of how easy it was for people to seek recognition, to want to be seen. And suddenly, she understood what she had been feeling since arriving. The subtle mirror between them. Mark trying to prove his worth through action, and she trying to remember hers through memory. When night came, Claire lay in bed, listening to the sea again. The sound carried her back to that studio, to James's soft voice and his gentle certainty that she was made to create beauty. In that moment, she realized the past never truly left. It only waited for silence, for stillness, to whisper its way back. And though she didn't know it yet, that whisper would soon guide her towards something she hadn't expected. The courage to begin again. That afternoon, Claire walked down to the shoreline alone. The sky was pale blue, soft and endless. She let the waves kiss her feet and thought about all the versions of herself that had come and gone, the young woman who dreamed in colors, the one who waited for letters that never came, the one who learned to smile even when her heart was heavy. Sometimes. She wondered if growing older meant learning how to live with unfinished stories. Behind her, she heard Emma calling her name, waving from the porch with a bright smile. Claire waved back, hiding her thoughts beneath a practiced calm. Later, at dinner, Mark mentioned fixing an old sailboat he kept in the shed. It's been years since I took it out, he said. Maybe I'll show you tomorrow. There was that word again, show. It was harmless, casual, but something about it made her heart tighten, not in discomfort but in a quiet awareness. She was reminded of how easy it was for people to seek recognition, to want to be seen. And suddenly, she understood what she had been feeling since arriving. The subtle mirror between them. Mark trying to prove his worth through action, and she trying to remember hers through memory. When night came, Claire lay in bed, listening to the sea again. The sound carried her back to that studio, to James's soft voice and his gentle certainty that she was made to create beauty. In that moment, she realized the past never truly left. It only waited for silence, for stillness, to whisper its way back. And though she didn't know it yet, that whisper would soon guide her towards something she hadn't expected, the courage to begin again. The morning after the storm felt washed clean, as if the whole world had taken a deep breath. The sea was calm again, its waves softer, slower, like someone whispering an apology they had waited too long to say. Claire stood on the porch, her hair brushing against her face as the wind moved gently through. The garden shimmered with droplets of rain. Everything smelled of renewal. Emma was still asleep, but Mark was already outside, kneeling beside the old sailboat he'd been repairing. The wood gleamed with new polish, and there was something peaceful about the way he worked quietly. With care, Claire watched him for a moment before walking over. "It's beautiful," she said softly. He turned, surprised to see her awake. "Morning," he said, smiling. "Almost done. Just needs a little more sanding." She nodded, running her hand lightly across the side of the boat. "You've really put your heart into it." Mark gave a small laugh. "Maybe too much. I guess I just wanted to prove to myself I could still finish something that matters." Claire looked at him, sensing there was more behind his words. "Mark," she said gently, "you don't need to prove anything. Not to anyone." He paused, resting his tools on the ground. The morning light caught his face, softening his expression. "Maybe. But lately I felt like I'm always trying to be enough for Emma, for this home, for everything. And then you came, and somehow you reminded me what it feels like to care about something again. Not in a complicated way, just in a real way." Claire's heart ached at his honesty, not because of what he said, but because of what it revealed. It wasn't love he was confessing, but exhaustion. The quiet weariness of someone who had forgotten how to feel proud of himself. She took a slow breath. "You don't have to look for worth in what others see. You already have it, Mark. Emma sees it every day. I see it too. Maybe you just stopped believing it." He nodded slowly, his gaze falling to the ground. "You're right," he said. "I think I forgot." There was no tension in the air. No unspoken longing, just two people standing in the calm of truth, both recognizing something they needed to hear. A bird flew overhead, landing near the garden fence. The sound broke the heaviness of the moment, and Claire smiled faintly. "You've built something wonderful here," she said. "Don't let the small doubts take that away." Mark looked up at her, gratitude soft in his eyes. "Thank you, Claire, for saying that." Later that day, the three of them shared lunch outside, under a clear blue sky. The conversation was easy stories about childhood, small jokes, the kind of laughter that lingers warmly without effort. When Emma mentioned how proud she was of the finished sailboat, Mark glanced at Claire for just a second, a silent thank you before saying, "It's for both of you. Maybe we can all take it out sometime." Emma's face lit up. "I'd love that." Claire smiled too, though deep down she knew her visit was coming to an end. There was a quiet understanding in her heart that it was time to go home to her own life, her own unfinished stories, her own beginning. That evening, as the sun lowered over the sea, Claire stood by the water one last time. The wind was cool, the light golden. Behind her, she heard footsteps, Emma's. "I'm really going to miss you," Emma said softly. Claire turned and smiled. "I'll miss you too. But this place, it's helped me remember who I am again." Emma tilted her head. "You mean your painting?" Claire nodded. "Yes, but more than that. It reminded me how to feel things without fear. To see beauty again." Emma reached out and hugged her. "I'm glad you came, Claire." When they pulled apart, Claire noticed Mark standing near the porch, watching them with a small, genuine smile. He raised a hand in a quiet wave. She waved back, knowing that no words were needed. Everything that had to be said was already understood. The next morning, as the car drove away from the little coastal house, Claire looked back through the window. The ocean stretched endlessly beside her, calm and sure. The world felt open again. She took out her small sketchbook and began to draw the sailboat, the porch, the horizon. Her lines were steady, her heart light. She thought about the past, about James, about the people who had once walked beside her. She thought about Mark and Emma, about kindness, and about the strange way life offers reminders through unexpected people. For the first time in years, she didn't feel haunted by what she'd lost. She felt grateful for what had found her, instead peace, purpose, and a sense of quiet hope. She closed her sketchbook and looked out at the morning sky. The sea shimmered, like a promise kept, and Claire whispered to herself, "Maybe it's never too late to begin again."